Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Tufford with my wife, Cindy Tufford. I want to welcome everyone to Olympia Indivisible's Meet the Candidates virtual town hall. Cindy and I are members of the OI Endorsements Committee, which is hosting this event. Thanks for being here, including any non-OI folks who are online. The Olympia Indivisible Endorsements team hopes that the Meet the Candidate events will help you make an informed decision when it comes time for our endorsement vote. In the next month, we will be sending a ballot to each of the over 600 OI members to vote for the candidates that they want Indivisible to endorse. For those who couldn't attend this live event or missed any part of it, we are recording it and we'll be posting it to the Olympia Indivisible website. Cindy and I, along with other OI members, are residents of Lacey. We recognize the critical importance of this city council election to the balance of influence on council. All 4 of the seats currently held by more left-leaning council members will be on the ballot in November. The loss of even one to the more conservative candidate likely will alter how Lacey approaches climate mitigation and many other issues important to not only Lacey, all jurisdictions in Thurston County. It is for this reason that the OI Steering Committee decided to stretch their usual boundaries and become involved in this municipal election. For that, we thank them. The good news, bad news is that only 2 of the seats are contested. The one currently held by Carolyn Cox, position 7, and the one being vacated by retiring Deputy Mayor Cynthia Pratt, position 4. This afternoon, we will be hearing from Robin Vazquez, candidate for position 4 to replace Cynthia Pratt, and Carolyn Cox, the position 7 incumbent. I will note that we sent questionnaires to their challengers, Felix Piguero and Emma McSherry, with the offer to appear on a town hall like this one. Neither candidate responded. The endorsement team will present an evaluation of the candidates for Port of Olympia Commission and Lacey City Council at an all-member meeting on Saturday, January 26th. And just to make sure you are aware, in the past few weeks, we have met with Port of Olympia Commission candidates Melissa Denton, Amy Evans, and Joel Hansen, the candidates for District 3, and Jesse Simons and Bob Ayal, the candidates for District 2. Those Zoom recordings can be viewed on the OI website, as will the recording we make this afternoon. And with that, I will hand it off to Cindy.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to introduce Robin Vasquez. Okay, Robin is a native of the PNW. She has a degree in political science and Spanish and a master's in public administration. She works as the Workforce Strategies Section Chief for the state, where she supports statewide efforts to increase the performance and inclusiveness of the state workforce. Prior to her work there, she negotiated collective bargaining agreements on behalf of the state of Washington. And before coming to work for the state, she worked as a labor advocate and union negotiator for the Washington Federation of State Employees. She has taken mediation training through the Thurston County Dispute Resolution Center and is an experienced panelist and trainer on various human resource and labor relations topics. Robin is also a volunteer on the Planning Commission for the City of Lacey, where she has supported code changes that strike a balance between the interests of business and the environment and residents. Robin lives in Lacey with her partner and their 2 children, and in her spare time, she enjoys writing, painting, singing karaoke, and playing roller derby with a local rec league. Okay, so Robin, can you take about 10 minutes and tell us why you want to be on City Council, what qualifies you for the office, and what you hope to accomplish if elected? Then we'll open it up for about 30 minutes of Q&A, and anyone in the audience that would like to ask Robin a question, please put them in chat, preceded by the letter Q. So Robin, if you could take 10 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Great.
Mhm.
I don't know that any organization so far has given me 10 whole minutes. They tell you to prepare to have 1 or 2 minutes, not 10. So I may wrap up a little more quickly than that, and then we'll just have more opportunity for questions. So hi, everybody. I'm Robin Vazquez. I live in Lacey. I'm running for Lacey City Council, position 4. I'm running because I want to make Lacey a great place for my family and other people's families to live, not just now, but in future decades. I bring an experience or a series of experiences and skill from my time working for both public sector unions and the state of Washington and navigating complicated policy issues and trying to find solutions where, we started out with conflict and disagreement. So I'm not conflict averse. I'm no stranger to needing to try to find a middle ground between parties that may be opposed on things. But I really want to focus on increasing our supply of housing, especially affordable housing. Thurston County has a housing crisis right now. We don't have enough housing for the people who currently live here, and we're anticipating a substantial population growth in the near future. I want to make sure that the people who do live here have transportation options. So whether you choose to ride a bike or take the bus, that you can get where you're going safely and quickly. Or if you choose to take a car, you're able to do that as well. I think if we make riding the bus more efficient, right? If you can get where you're going quickly, you can access bus lines safely, more people will choose to take the bus. And if you can take a bicycle somewhere and feel safe doing it instead of like you're, going to get run over by high speed traffic 6 inches away from you with just a painted line to protect you. If you feel safe on a bicycle, you will bike more. I'm a sometimes bike commuter. So I live here in Lacey in the Brentwood neighborhood, but I bike when I used to go to my office, and the times before the pandemic, I would bike downtown in Olympia, and having access to the Chehalis Trail and the Woodland Trail made all the difference in me being willing to take my bike downtown sometimes and save myself a car trip. But if we can provide access to those other options for people, I think fewer people will drive single occupancy vehicles, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions, wear and tear on our streets, saves taxpayers money because we don't have to constantly repair the streets, and it reduces traffic for people who do have to drive. I also want to make sure that our community is prepared for disasters. So whether it's an earthquake, they keep telling us to prepare for that Cascadia rising quake that is overdue. We did an exercise a couple of years ago to test our emergency response systems in preparation for that large earthquake, and they increased the length of time they say a person or a family needs to be able to survive on their own from about 3 days to 2 weeks. So they said, we think realistically that a person needs to plan to be 2 weeks prepared with water, food, medical supplies before professional assistance can get to some people. So I want to make sure that Lacey has what it needs to be as responsive as possible, whether it's an earthquake, a flood, some other natural disaster, or another pandemic, right? How do we take care of our people that live in Lacey by having the equipment and the training and the supplies that we need? And a part of that, developing that community emergency preparedness, is implementation of a language access plan. Right now, even though Lacey is the most diverse of the 3 large cities in Thurston County, we don't have an active language access plan, which means that for those among us that may not speak English fluently, we don't have a way to communicate with them when emergencies occur. And so I want to close that gap so that if something happens, we can get critical information to all members of our community, and it makes us all safer. So those are 3 of the things that I want to work on, but I'm interested in more than just those 3 things. Again, when you're running for office, they tell you to have the 3 things, but I'm really committed to making sure that Lacey takes an active stance in the regional discussion on climate change. And I want to have the opportunity to partner with Carolyn in her work to bring Lacey to the table on addressing issues of homelessness. So homelessness is another one of those issues that is impacting our whole community, right? And I think increasing the supply of housing and the affordability of housing is one way to influence that issue, but it's complicated. We need to do more than just increase the supply of shelter. We need to increase access to services and address some of the root causes of homelessness. So those are some of the things that I hope to be able to work on if elected to your city council in Lacey. I think I'll pause there and open it up for questions if that's okay.
Okay, I have some questions, and everybody in the audience, please feel free again to enter the question on chat preceded with the letter Q. In Northeast Lacey, there are millions of square feet of warehouses taking huge amounts of land that in many cases require mature forest to clear cut. The jobs that these warehouses offer tend to be physically demanding, often working 12-hour shifts outside of regular business hours. What is your opinion on whether this is the best use of land and whether these jobs are the type that the city should be supporting?
Well, Cindy, first, I want to thank you for the question I think you asked at my kickoff like 3 months ago about my opinion on this, a very similar issue. And I think at the time I hadn't done as much research as I have done now. In between now and then, I've had the opportunity to learn more about our urban forestry plan in Lacey and some of the steps that we need to take in order to meet our climate mitigation goals. I think Bill DePoto asked me a question about that, or perhaps it was Wayne Olson had asked a question about, should we have targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions? And my answer is yes. To hit our targets, we need carbon sequestration. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to protect mature trees and to plant more trees. So this issue came up at the Lacey Planning Commission. The last 2 sessions that we met, we were given an opportunity to vote to recommend the Lacey Urban Forestry Plan for a vote to the council. But a lot of folks had a lot of concerns with the changes that had been made to the urban forestry plan, because even though we did a lot of outreach to gather community input on, what do you want to see regarding trees in Lacey? And a lot of folks from the community said, I love the trees in Lacey. I'm concerned about Northeast Lacey and the cutting of the forest up there. I want to see more protections for trees. I want to see more education about what the city's doing to protect trees. Even though that was the input that we got for the most part, the amendments in the forestry plan that was given to the Planning Commission essentially made it a little easier to cut trees down. And so a lot of members of the community showed up to the Planning Commission meeting and said, these two things don't connect. Where is the disconnect? Why didn't you hear what we were saying, that we want to protect trees? And so we had the opportunity to pend action on the urban forestry plan for 2 weeks. And then when we came back, what we ended up doing is recommending that the city put together like a citizens advisory group on trees, which had been a recommendation in the urban forestry plan since 2004. And it hadn't ever actually been implemented. So we're recommending that the city consider hiring an arborist and putting together that citizens committee on trees to come up with ways that we can educate the community on what's already being done to protect and support trees. And then maybe recommend some additional action to meet our climate mitigation goals. So the other part of your question was, do I think that warehouse jobs are the best use of that space? And I would say, well, no. I'm not saying I want to get rid of those jobs that currently exist, but I do think that we should pursue other opportunities to develop manufacturing or jobs that maybe have a higher wage and better working conditions. So I wouldn't want to see a proliferation of more warehouse jobs for 2 reasons. Number one, as you said, they're not the best paying jobs in the world. And also, if you have to build great big warehouses, I don't think that we should be cutting down that many trees anymore if we want to maintain our urban canopy and sequester carbon. Sorry, that was a very long answer. Apologies.
No, that's great. The next, I guess I'll go to one of the questions that just came in from Wayne Olson. What is your position on the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan and why?
Thanks for the question. I may have telegraphed my answer a little bit, but I'm for it. I think we need to take action on climate change. One of the reasons I'm running is because I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I want Lacey and Washington State and the world to be a good place for my kids when they get older. I want Lacey to be a place that they can settle down and still enjoy the beautiful green spaces that we have today. The way that we do that, make that future, is by protecting the climate and taking action now. And I think it's not everybody is in favor of the climate mitigation plan. You know, Lacey is not yet taken the additional step of declaring a climate emergency, although Tumwater and Olympia have done so. And what I hear from folks that don't think that climate change is as big of a deal is, well, I'm just not sure that we should spend the money on this, right? I don't know that we can afford to do anything about climate change. And I think that that's really short-sighted. So I'm supportive of the climate mitigation plan and taking action now.
So the next question I have is about housing. How can the city address the lack of affordable housing using zoning, annexation, and tax incentives?
I think there's a lot that's already in place, right? There are incentives already built in to try to incentivize developers to build. For instance, in the central district right there around Hunthammer Park. I always forget the names of the different districts. I'm sure Carolyn knows it right off the top of her head, but we're trying to incentivize developers to build in that area. And there's a tax credit if you build any housing, and then there's an additional credit if you build housing that includes affordable units. We're not seeing that those incentives are having the effect that we want, right? We're not seeing enough developers saying, yeah, sign me up, I want to build more housing. So we're exploring other options as well, trying to reduce costs or do market studies that show that if you build housing in a place, right, that you'll be able to sell it. I still think that we should be bargaining hard with developers to set aside some affordable housing units in any development that's built. Although I'm a negotiator, so I know that sometimes a thing that you really, really want that's a policy priority may not always be possible because we don't have a way to force developers to build housing in our community, right? They can just walk away if the deal is not good enough for them. So we have to find that balance, but I want to see us incentivize the building of affordable housing. One of the ways I'd like to see us do it is by tweaking zoning rules where we can to allow for more residential units closer to commercial areas. Right, we did that in the Hawks Prairie area because if you build more residential units nearer businesses, it's good for business and it makes a community more walkable. And frankly, Lacey's kind of running out of new space to build residential units. So we have to look at infill where there's already stuff built. And that means it's easier perhaps to put those residential units on the sewer instead of building septic tanks, which can pollute the water table. And you've already got some of the utilities and infrastructure there. So those are some ideas for how to maybe get us some more affordable housing.
The next question I have concerns homelessness. Homelessness is a problem that is recognized as caused by a number of complex and difficult problems, only one of which is lack of affordable housing. What can be done to address this problem? And for the segment, and I know this may be controversial, for the segment of the homeless population that resists help, probably due to drug addiction or mental health issues, do you think help should be forced upon them by law enforcement? If not, how would you propose to help?
What an interesting question. I don't know that anybody's ever framed it like that before to me. I don't think that we should force help on people, but I do think that we should try to lower barriers to accessing help, including not requiring that someone be completely drug and alcohol free before they're eligible for assistance or support. And I think that that may be a controversial view, but I don't think that we should predicate our help for people in need on whether or not they're deserving. Because I think it helps our community if we assist people in need, even if they may not be in a place where they can change, right? Because if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, the basics are down there on the bottom. And if you don't have those things, it's really hard to do things like self-actualize or become emotionally mature and healthy. Like, you got to have housing first. And so I think that that's my general opinion is, what can we do to provide support to people so that they can get into a more stable situation, whether it's having reliable access to a caseworker, a social worker, somebody who's trained to assist them and work through their issues. Can we get them into some kind of supported assisted living facility or supportive housing, a shelter, somewhere where they have a bed and a roof over their head and access to the basics? And then I think a lot of folks will be in a position to work on, upskilling so that they can get a job. I don't think that we can require that someone have a job and not be on drugs and not drink alcohol before we're able to provide them with that basic support.
The next question I have is about the police chief. Lacey is searching for a new police chief. If you were responsible for the hiring decision, what would you be looking for in the perfect candidate?
I think I would want to see somebody with a record of having worked with citizens advisory groups, with members of the community outside the law enforcement circle. I think it's important that we do a thorough vetting process. So someone, of course, without a history of misuse of force, that's a starting point. Yeah, I think someone with that experience of having worked with citizens advisory groups or an oversight group made up of citizens and who was able to work effectively in that environment, or even somebody who may have been a leader in a community that had, Justice Department oversight and was able to address some of the issues that the Justice Department was there to address, right? So not just somebody with a perfect record, but maybe somebody who worked with others to improve. That's what I would want to look for.
Okay. So the next question came from Jody Disney. And her question was, how will you work to build collaboration with Olympia and Tumwater? Please break this down in steps, and what are your priorities for action?
Just in general, how would I work with Olympia and Tumwater?
How would you build collaboration? Yes.
I think I'm guessing the learning curve when stepping on a council is quite steep, right? You're assigned to a number of different committees and you have to get up to speed on all those committees, but there are some areas where there's overlap, like the Thurston Regional Planning Council. I already occasionally attend the Thurston Regional Planning Council meetings because of some of my work with the state, but I'd want to look at opportunities for me to jump in on regional boards, regional committees, committees where we're partnering together with Tumwater and Olympia. So I think as I'm stepping into the role of a city council person, when I have the opportunity to volunteer to be on boards and commissions, I'd look for places where I could be on regional boards so that I could start building those relationships. I have the fortune of having been on the planning commission, so I've got that experience going for me, but that's Lacey specific. I've also been endorsed by a number of Tumwater and Olympia City Council people. And so I've already started to build those relationships. I've talked to, Ty and Carolina from the county commission. I've talked to Jim Cooper and, others from Olympia on some of the regional issues. So I'm already working on having those relationships developing so that if I were to step onto one of those regional councils or committees, it helps if you've talked to somebody before. You can be more effective quicker if you've talked to somebody before and they know you.
The next question I have concerns water. What should the city do to convert septic systems to city sewer? And how can that affect future water resources?
I think this should be a question for Carolyn because she's done work on this already. But I think one of the tactics that has been effective is that we identified a place where we knew that a part of the city that hadn't yet, it was urban growth area. It wasn't a part of Lacey technically, but we knew from water samples at the golf course that the septic tanks were leaking into the water around the golf course. And so what the city did there, and I thought was really smart, was they worked with the homeowners in that neighborhood and said, you know, will you agree to sign on to an annexation or give the city power of attorney for a future annexation? And in return, we will cover the cost of converting your septic tank onto the city sewer. Because for a single homeowner, that's tremendously expensive, right? And the city has an incentive to do that because otherwise it pollutes the water for more than just that single homeowner. So I thought that that was a really excellent sort of policy agreement that they came to. And that, by the way, was something that Carolyn ran on for her campaign back in 2017. And it was something I heard her say when I was in a Young Democrats meeting. And it made me very excited about her campaign because I knew she had like real policy ideas. And so to see that having happen, like to become a reality, that we're converting people, we're helping residents get converted over from septic tanks to city sewers is really exciting.
What can the city do to regulate utilities in such areas as providing more broadband access and ensuring a more robust electric grid as natural gas is phased out?
So I confess this is an area that I need to do more homework. One of the things that I'd want to look into is whether, as we're going through neighborhoods and updating either water pipes or power lines, do we have the opportunity to embed telecommunications lines in there as well, right? To make sure that the internet is there. I don't know if that's been done yet in Lacey, but that's not, you know, because if you're going to open the street up anyway and inconvenience everybody that lives on that road and have construction, just put everything in at the same time if you can, right? So if you're going to update water and electrical, see if you can update internet lines as well.
Yeah, burying electric cables would be a advantage when that was opened up.
I think it would help in the case of an earthquake or a windstorm.
Yeah. You mentioned a priority in emergency disaster preparation. What should the city be doing to prepare for emergencies? And for something like an earthquake disaster, should Lacey conduct a citywide drill?
I think when I talked to the firefighters, they said it had been quite some time since the city and the firefighters had partnered on a drill. There had been one done quite a few years ago, but they thought that it might be time for another one. I think it's a very good idea to do a dry run before something bad happens. You know, if we do fire drills with our kids when there's no fire so that they have muscle memory of getting out the door before there's pandemonium and panic, I think that same principle applies for cities and counties. Like if we do a dry run, do the walkie-talkies work? Are we all on the same channel? Are we missing basic instructions for where to go or who's in charge? You know, I went through the community emergency response team training put on by Serve Washington a few years ago because at work, I wanted to be able to be useful if we had an earthquake, a fire, or other natural disaster, right? To be able to help get people out of the building and apply basic first aid and make sure that everybody got out safely. So I think making sure that we're ready for a disaster is a good way to reduce the negative impacts of the disaster when it happens.
To totally switch topics, what is your opinion on legislation to control gun ownership?
Just in general, I'm for it. I think it depends on the, on the individual policies embedded in the legislation. I know that when my grandfather passed away, I inherited a gun. He willed it to me because it had been my father's, who gave it to my grandfather, and so he gave it back to me. And I remember calling the local police department and saying, so I inherited this gun. What form do I have to fill out? Do I need to come down to the office and tell anybody that I have this firearm in my possession? And he sort of laughed. He said, no, we don't need to know. Thanks for calling. Bye. And I guess before that, I didn't realize that we didn't have a lot of just basic checks. You need to get a driver's license to drive an automobile, but there's no record keeping related to owning a gun. So I have a concealed carry permit and I'm a gun owner, but I think that reasonable gun control laws are in everybody's best interest.
Another question, and again, if anybody has any others, I'll just keep on going here. Here's one from John Cezanne. What was the most concerning issue you had to deal with as a member of the Planning Commission?
I think one of the more concerning issues recently was that the urban forestry plan, because the Planning Commission had an opportunity to review a lot of the voter feedback or the resident feedback. A number of folks submitted public testimony saying we really want to make sure that this adequately protects trees. But then the version of the plan we got initially it had almost no changes in it except for 2 changes that ostensibly made it easier for a homeowners association to remove a tree in a public space. And so again, there was that disconnect there between what it seemed like we had heard from the public and then the draft that was brought forward by city staff. And to the credit of the city staff, when we said, we've got concerns about this, I don't think that this is what we want to put forth, they came back the next time and they said, okay, here are the issues. Here's what we heard. Here's a beautiful PowerPoint with the data. And then they put it before the Planning Commission to make a decision on. And we had a pretty robust discussion about what do we do, right? How do we change what we've been given so that it better aligns with what the residents of Lacey want to see? And so I don't know if that was concerning, but I think a lot of the things that come through the Planning Commission, the staff does a fantastic job of doing the research, putting together the presentation. And so the decision points for the Planning Commission are pretty clear. It was that urban forestry plan, where the decision point wasn't as clear as it might have been. And then we had to stop, take another look at it, and then try a different tact.
This question comes from Rory Summerson. Can you speak to any shortcomings in terms of EDI in Lacey and how you feel you would approach improvements?
So thank you for the question. So I work in the space of equity, diversity, and inclusion as part of my day job. And we look at the demographics of the state workforce. I think I would like to kind of apply a similar lens to decisions that are made in Lacey. Lacey just formed an equity commission, and I'm really excited to see that group get going. But I have questions about whether does that question get asked when decisions are made, policy decisions being made? Who does this benefit? Who might not receive the benefit of this policy decision if we make it? And then is there anybody missing? Are there voices missing? At the Thurston Regional Planning Council meeting was that Friday? Somebody raised a really good point, which was they had done an analysis of who was using the trails. And, they sent out a lot of surveys and they got survey data back. And what the survey data showed in the demographic questions was the people who filled the survey out were overwhelmingly female, well off, and white. And it's not because those are the only people that use the trails. Because you go sit on a bench and on one of our trails, you can see it. They're used by all kinds of folks. It's that those are the people who fill out surveys. And I'm a white lady. I fill out every survey that anybody sends to me. So anecdotal evidence suggests that, yeah, sometimes your respondent data sways what you find out. So we have to think about different ways to get that community voice in making our decisions, right? We have to do outreach to, again, communities whose first language may not be English or who don't communicate most naturally in English. We have a substantial population of Spanish speakers and Korean speakers in Lacey. How do we do outreach to make sure that those groups feel like they can influence the decisions that the city council makes?
Excellent answer. So I think we're approaching towards the end of the time. So I was just wondering, can you talk about how you plan to get name recognition and to win this election? And do you have any just final comments?
Name recognition, that may be something that if Olympia Indivisible decides to support me, I would ask for your help with. Because of the pandemic and just the weirdness right now, we don't have full license to start knocking on doors and talking to people in public spaces, right? There's still a little bit of a restriction on gathering publicly or knocking on doors. I hope to be able to do doorbelling later on in the summer, because I only have one opponent. We don't have a primary, so the vote is in November. So I hope later on this summer to be able to doorbell. I've had folks say that they're willing to volunteer for me, which is fantastic. I've got signs out there being distributed. I think I'm going to get a couple of those larger signs soon, which is exciting. I can point them out to my kids. My daughter's 7 and she can read, so she'll see her mom's name on a big sign somewhere. But yeah, I think meeting with people like this and then having folks from groups that are supportive of my campaign spread the word to the people that they know is the best way, right? Word of mouth from somebody that you know in your social circle is one of the best ways to find out about a political candidate that's good. So that's what I'm counting on from the groups that have endorsed me and from the people that have endorsed me. I hope that they'll spread the word about my campaign.
Okay. So I think that's all I have. And I think it's time to, I thank you for all your responses. They were excellent. I think it's time we take maybe a 5-minute break and then Dan will introduce Carolyn Cox. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you for the chance to speak to you.